All right, our second section today is on isosceles and equilateral triangles. All right, so it says, how are the base angles of isosceles triangles related? Okay, what are base angles? Well, base angles are the angles opposite of the congruent sides. Now, isosceles triangles have how many congruent sides? 2, okay? Now, the actual definition says 2 or more, but we call isosceles 2 congruent sides and equilateral 3 congruent sides. So, the base angles are the angles opposite the 2 congruent sides. So, C and A would be the base angles. How are they related? Well, if we do a line of reflection here and we fold them over the top of each other, what would you say about angles C and A? They would be congruent. They would be the same as each other. Okay? So that's what happens. The angles opposite the congruent sides are congruent to each other. The sides opposite the congruent angles are congruent to each other. So if you start out with congruent angles, then the sides opposite are going to be congruent. If you start out with congruent sides, the angles opposite are going to be congruent. So an architect is designing a community park between North 1st Street and South 1st Street. The pathways on either side of the pool will be equal length. Okay? To protect the landscaping and minimize erosion, the architect will place a triangular section of cobblestones at the corners along Park Plaza. What angles should they make these corners? So these corners are going to have cobblestones here and here. How many degrees are these angles? Well, from previous chapters, how many degrees are in any triangle? 180. So if they use 50 degrees up right here, these two share how much, Ashton? 130. So if they share 130, two angles share 130 and they're equal. What's 130 divided by 2? 65. So each of these angles should be 65 degrees. All right. So it says angle A is 28 degrees. Angle A is not one of the base angles. So how many degrees are in a triangle? 180. So if you take 180 minus 28, you get 152. If you divide that by 2, each of the base angles would be 76 degrees. B would be 76, C would be 76. All right. If these two angles are equal, what two sides are equal? PR, PQ, QR. 2 of the 3 would be congruent. Which two are congruent? PR and QR, because they are opposite of the congruent angles. The sides opposite the congruent angles are the congruent sides. So this is equal to this. X plus 20 equals 8x over 3. Oh my goodness, we have a fraction involved. How do you solve an equation with a fraction involved? Well, you can get rid of your fractions right away by multiplying everything by 3. Multiply by the least common denominator, and you get rid of all your fractions. So 3x plus 20 equals 8x, because these cancel. Now it's easy to solve. Subtract 3x. 5x equals 20, and divide by 5. X equals 4. So if we stick 4 in here, how long is this side? 24. If we stick 4 in here, we get 32. Whoa. Did that work out right? Mr. Bierschbach. None of you guys told me I was doing this wrong. But guess what? What did I forget to do? I forgot to distribute. That's 60. So 60 equals 5x divided by 5. X equals 12. Stick 12 in there. 12 plus 20 is 32. Put a 12 in here, we get 96 divided by 3, which is 32. That's why we check our answers, because if I wouldn't check my answer, that would have been wrong. Okay, stick 12 in here. 6 times 12 is 72, minus 12 is 60. Obviously, PQ is longer than PR or QR. All right, what's the missing angle, do you think? 24. Because 24 plus 24 is 48, plus 132 is 180. Okay, so that means which two sides are equal? AC and BC. So 2x plus 15 equals 4x minus 5. So subtract 2x from each side. 15 equals 2x minus 5. Add 5. 20 equals 2x. Divide by 2. X equals 10. So if you stick 10 in there, 40 minus 5 is 35. 10 in there, 20 plus 15 is 35. If you stick 10 in here, 4 times 10 is 40, plus 12 is 52. So 35 plus 35 plus 52 equals 112. That's the perimeter. Okay? All right. So, part of being an isosceles triangle is it makes two congruent triangles. So since it makes two congruent triangles, this side's congruent to this side's congruent to this side, and this side is congruent to itself. That's called the reflexive property, and we'll get into that in the future. So then this angle is congruent to this angle is congruent to this angle, and the two 90-degree angles are equal. So if you have an isosceles triangle, you can draw an altitude straight down, and it'll make two congruent triangles. So, a prefabricated house is delivered to a foundation in two symmetrical halves that are assembled on site. Along the planned route of the site, the truck must pass under a bridge that has a clearance height of 17 feet. Will this house make it under a 17-foot bridge? Well, we know this is 10 feet. This is 16 feet. This is 14 feet. So what is this right here? Okay. So to figure this out, we can use the Pythagorean theorem. What's Pythagorean theorem? Well, c squared equals a squared plus b squared. So 16 squared equals 14 squared plus b squared. 16 squared is 256. 14 squared is 196, right? So b squared must be 60. So if we take the square root of 60, that is 7 point something something. 7 point what? 8? So if this is like 7 point anything, 7.8, 7.7, this right here from here to here is 17 feet. If he tries to go under that bridge, what happens? Rips the roof right off that house. So, don't want to do that. All right, equilateral triangles. Every equilateral triangle is equiangular. Every equiangular triangle is equilateral. Because they're isosceles triangles too. So the sides opposite these two congruent angles are congruent. The sides opposite of these two congruent angles are congruent. And so everything's congruent there. Okay, all the sides are congruent, all the angles are congruent. So an equilateral triangle is an equiangular triangle. So if CBD, this whole thing right here is 130, what are the rest of the angles? Well, in an equilateral triangle, there's 3 congruent angles. How many degrees are in an equilateral triangle? 180. What's 180 divided by 3? So this is 60, this is 60, and this is 60, which makes this 70. Now, if this is 70, this is an isosceles triangle, right? So there's 180 degrees in this triangle. If we take 70 for this angle, these two share 110. What's left for each angle? 55. So angle BAD is 55 degrees. BAD. A is the one we're looking for in this triangle. BAD is 55. If we were asked for CAD, that would be 115. All right. So, isosceles and equilateral triangles. If you have 2 congruent sides, the angles opposite are congruent. If you have 2 congruent angles, the sides opposite are congruent. A perpendicular bisector happens in an isosceles triangle, which makes this perpendicular and the same distance away from each side. An equilateral triangle is also equiangular. So, that's what you need to know for this section. We will take 2 quizzes on Wednesday over this stuff. So your assignment should be out there.